Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar from the Innovation Vista team called Assessing Your IT Innovation in 45 Minutes. Please feel free as we go to ask questions. I've got the Q&A box open for all participants, so anything that comes up along the way, if I feel like it belongs in discussion on a particular slide, I'll answer it then, or if it's a general discussion point, I'll get to that at the end of our session. So with that said, thank you again for being here. So first of all, just very briefly, why should you listen to me? I am the founder and CEO of Innovation Vista. Our entire practice is around innovation and leadership. And so you see on the slide here a few highlights of what we do. We do have over 300 expert consultants, C-level consultants, former CIOs, CTOs, CDOs, CXOs, all C-level, all successful in that seat. And they are now consulting, some of them freelance, some of them semi-retired. And they are part of our network. So when we have client projects come up, we match them not just on their technical capability and track record, but also on their experience in a client's industry, which we feel like is just critical for a jump start and for really understanding the context of what's possible and what's not, and what's meaningful and what's not. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I did want to share a little bit. Certainly, this is air that we breathe every day relative to assessing, recommending improvements, and ultimately finding very meaningful forward steps for IT groups. So hopefully what I've got to share today is relevant and meaningful for you. So just a little bit of context on the industry and where we are right now. This graph is a logarithmic scale of the number of transistors that are on a commercially available CPU, starting from 1970 all the way through 2022, as you see. For the very first time in history, a single chip, that right now is the Apple M1 at the top of the graph, has more transistors than the human brain has neurons. It's a meaningful threshold. It doesn't mean that CPUs are as smart as people. Certainly there's more to it than sheer numbers, but it does represent this just explosion of processing power that has impacted our the entire world, really. And think back to 1970, 1980, 1990, how much has changed and how quickly that change has come. And this chart is no small reason why. The internet is another large factor, obviously, in that, beginning really in the mid-90s. The chart on the left shows when people across the globe began to connect to the internet for email, browsing, any of the various protocols and services that people use the internet for now. Certainly, there are far more now than there were back in 1995 and 2000, with the explosion of mobile, with the app ecosystems out there. It's crossing the globe, and at this point it is 62%, something like that, 5 out of 8 across the world. And certainly with technologies coming like Starlink and low Earth orbit solutions to the internet, we may see an enormous jump where this goes to 100% overnight. In the US, it's already at 93%. Not sharing anything you don't know, but I think it is interesting to look at the pie chart and see how each of those 5-year segments has expanded. So it actually is accelerating beyond a linear growth. The chart on the right is about e-commerce. How much of the retail sales occur in an e-commerce platform as opposed to in-person brick and mortar traditional retail setting. This graph also is accelerating, and you see the enormous jump that occurred because of COVID between 2019 and 2020, now surpassing 20%. Actually, in Asia, it is approaching 50% of all sales. The US and Europe are just over 20%, and then some parts of the world certainly are lower percentages, where the logistics capability for shipping, et cetera, is a little bit weaker in some nations, but the trend is the same worldwide. All right, so as a part of our practice, we have developed a proprietary framework, and really this is it's a grouping of IT capabilities under these headings that visually we're representing here, kind of showing the prerequisite upstream and downstream relationship between these things. And I see your question there. Thank you. I think that one I will address at the end. That's I've got some thunder that I don't want to steal early. So let me get to that. Thank you. The maturity journey, so to speak. We do have clients sometimes approach us and say, "Hey, we understand you've launched several AI programs. We want to get AI off the ground. We think there's a lot of promise there for our company." Great, fantastic. Love to talk about that. It's one of the most exciting things that we see and help with. But for some clients, when we begin that conversation, we uncover just myriad issues and weaknesses and struggles with some of the things a little bit lower on this pyramid. And our guidance to those clients is look, if you are having your email system crash on a semi-weekly basis, if you lost production data because of hardware failures, if you have been breached or hacked with a ransomware attack, it probably makes more sense to focus on those things first. This webinar is all about assessing yourself. So we are going to get into each of these in more detail. What do they mean? And if you're scoring at home, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your own IT group? That really, hopefully, is a helpful thing. Of course, being the base of the pyramid, we do suggest that stabilization needs to have a strong score. Really, anything below 70% is probably needing immediate attention. And depending on the industry, the regulatory environment, things like that, you may need to be 80, 90+% in order to really have what you need in place. Optimization, there are many things here. Often the bang for the buck really comes in this set of competencies and approaches. This is where we get methodologies. This is where we get architecture, the planning of platforms. Where are we going? Not just can we operate it today. A lot of fruit on the tree, so to speak, here in these capabilities. And then the most exciting, obviously, the one that really has become more feasible, more cost effective in the last 5 years, 10 years than ever before is the monetization. And we do see in industries that really our clients are sometimes surprised that we can find opportunities to create data products, to upsell their existing customers, or in some cases even find new customers that are not interested in products and services from the company, but they're interested in data and analytics and trends that the company has the right to aggregate and publish. Often a whole other set of revenue streams around those capabilities. So this is our framework when we are hired to come in and assess an IT group, often with a strategic roadmap to follow. This is our framework and what we use to do that. So without further ado, let's begin the assessment of your IT department. The first metric is reliability. Are the systems consistently functional? Performing. Things can be up and running and slow as Christmas, right? We've all experienced the hourglass, and I think increasingly that we used to say a half-second response time was sort of acceptable to the brain. It felt like immediate. I think now actually it's a third of a second. That deals with horsepower in your infrastructure. That deals with bandwidth in your circuits and your security perimeter, making sure you're not bottlenecking any of your system operation. Business responsive. Just a critical function here. When you ask a question or make a request, is your IT group able to respond? Whether they're internal, whether they're a hybrid of some help from vendors, some help internally, or fully outsourced. How do you really feel on a scale of 1 to 10 about the responsiveness? Depth supported. Do you have 1 or 2 people who know everything, and they have obviously tremendous leverage with the company, but also running tremendous risk for the company, the hit by a bus risk and all of those things that we think about? Do you have depth? Resiliency. So the cloud has been so huge on this front that really could be kind of a stand-in label for this item. There are other ways to do resiliency, and there are some industries where I understand the sensitivity of the data is such that public cloud frameworks just are not an option. So we need resiliency in other ways if we don't get it from the cloud. So do we have that? Are we at risk of a single point of failure in the architecture, or can we withstand things? And do we have 4 nines or 5 nines worth of reliability and continued operation, even when bad things happen? Growth ready. So all about capacity. I think about capacity really in 2 distinct ways. One is installed capacity. What do we have in place now if people want to add data or move things around on the platform? Do we have space? Do we have processing power for that to occur, and surges in requests if someone runs an enormous report? There's also a capacity concept we call architectural capacity, which is what could the platform expand to without a forklift of the underlying chassis or the basic hardware. Disaster protected. Again, a traditional question. This is separate from resiliency. Resiliency really is about recovering and continuing operations from component failures. Disasters are obviously everything from your actual computing equipment is damaged or cut off from communication, or in any number of things on the technology side. It also can be staff. It can be a destruction of your building. Maybe there's a fire in your place of business, something along that line, and you want to be sure that you can continue to run your business, run your systems, even after an event like that. Security, honestly, there's a case to be made that this belongs at the very top of the list, because without it, with just the absolute proliferation of bad actors that are out there, is it monitored? This is neglected a lot, and it goes with the line above, because often you can see if someone is attempting to get in. Intrusion efforts, port scanning, things of that nature on the perimeter, or really strange, inappropriate actions, queries, exports, things like that on an endpoint computer on your network. What's happening? Why is that happening? If it's out of the norm, and then compliance. So this is very industry specific. This is no small part of why in our practice we believe so strongly that we need to match up someone's experience from the industry perspective, not just have they done this particular digital transformation or technology achievement, but have they done it in the context of this industry. So they understand the compliance, they understand the regulatory environment, the legal requirements that are in place on an organization. So, okay, optimizing IT. Now we get into a little bit more. We've got the platform up and running. We've got a good score on the previous segment. Now, are we getting the bang for the buck? Are we doing things in a smart way? Are we doing things in a way that adds value and positions us for the future? Is it planned? First question. Honestly, this may surprise some people that this is on there. Everyone believes they have a plan if they have a budget. We consider it, do you have a purposeful architecture? When you take a step, when you initiate a project, is that a part of a bigger picture that you have, at least in broad strokes, you understand where you're going? Is it right-sized? We see mistakes in both directions. One of the values that we bring to the table, I think, is really that outside perspective to think more deeply about what are the real pros and cons and what are the trade-offs. And sometimes if you increase IT's budget by $500,000 a year, you save $5 million in the rest of the organization. We've literally seen that, 1,000% ROI right off the bat. So it's a deeper conversation, but are you right-sized? Scale of 1 to 10. Leveraged. We see, especially small and mid-sized companies, if you're an enormous company, you may need really very little help from third-party groups, but mid-sized companies have a benefit from third-party services, whether it's for specialty skills that make zero sense for someone to be recruited in as a full-time employee, or the ability to have someone on the leading edge who's seen multiple environments. This is the whole value proposition of consultants in general. There's value there. Advanced. So, you can run a successful platform on old tools. And actually, frankly, one of the most stable things you can do is run an old platform that's already been proven and stabilized. All the bugs have been worked out. The problem comes when you want to do that new thing, that next thing, when you want to integrate with a partner and they're using more modern tools and they're needing you to be able to handshake with them. And as noted here, the staff retention aspect, it is increasingly difficult to get IT professionals to work on older platforms for very long. They worry they're being dead-ended into a cul-de-sac for their career. Aligned. Are you aligned? So much ink is spilled every year on this topic, but it still is more difficult than people realize. So priorities have to be set in conjunction with the business. Sometimes set fully by the business. Sometimes IT is a partner, not a vendor, or not a sort of captive slave sort of relationship. Sometimes it's just a destination that the business needs to provide, and then trust that IT has what they need to understand that. And then, there may be prerequisite steps. There may be things that make it a more efficient path to get there. So business leaders, don't be too prescriptive, but do be visionary and ensure you're aligning the priorities. ROI focused. So is there a commercial mindset? And really just, is ROI a topic? Some IT groups have achieved this. It's not the way IT people are trained, but it certainly is. It's valuable, and it helps enormously with alignment if IT people, IT leaders in particular, can communicate their concepts in ROI terms. This is the language of business, right? And so I think, especially building new capabilities, it really is an investment. Methodological. Is there an approach? Just very simply, there's several out there. Agile has become so just ubiquitous. DevOps has a lot to offer. There are a lot of things about the way IT is done. I know those of you that are business executives, this is a hard thing to sort of get your arms around, but I do think it's extremely important. It helps staff be aligned. It helps your predictability of what you're working on. There's not quite the statement of work level scope when you work in an agile form. You need to think more about program budgeting than project budgeting, but it is certainly, we feel it's worth the trade-off in almost every use case. And very, very good question. Thank you for submitting that. So back on ROI focused, it does need collaboration with business stakeholders. The return on investment is not something, even if IT is thinking that way, they're not likely to have the details to know how to calculate the ROI in real terms. Okay, business efficient. So a lot of IT shops do great on a lot of these other metrics, and they've set things up in a process sense to make it easy for themselves. And I don't mean that that they're selfish. They think that is their job, right? They think that because the budget conversation happens every year and they're asked to do more with less or do more with the same, right? That is the mindset that comes from. What we want to see is, are they thinking about impact, efficiency, ROI, right? Are they thinking enterprise-wide? Because they can set up a process that is the best answer for them, standardizing, fitting everyone in the same box, right? A lot of these things come from that kind of mindset. It may be the right answer, but if the business, again, if the business is suffering $5 million of inefficiencies a year because IT is trying to save that last $500,000, what are we doing, right? Let's look. Let's open the hood. Let's really see why. Why is it this size? Why do we have this many people on the help desk? Staff empowering. So the other thing we don't want is IT to be the gatekeeper. Too much the gatekeeper, I guess I should say. On things like data, on things like can they update information even when something is outside of the normal process? Even if that needs to escalate to a supervisor or there's some kind of access control there. Insights enabling. So are we giving business leadership real information, not just data? Are we giving them information? And I know everyone has seen the pyramid from dated information to knowledge to wisdom, right? Very, very popular other pyramid framework. And I like that. I see often people don't even reach the information level. In descriptive, there are these huge row and column data dump kinds of reports that come out, and business leaders have to scroll through 25 lines to see one that's interesting. Let's do visualizations. Are we really enabling insights where you can look at something in 5 minutes and understand whether you're comfortable as a CEO? It's on autopilot. You can let it go. Great use of KPIs, by the way, to let CEOs pick their spots. Or is that KPI flashing yellow for you, and you want to call a meeting or ask a question to dive in more deeply? You have to be able to make those assessments quickly, easily, intuitively, and again, not scrolling through some large, 50-row report to find the one row that seems out of whack to you. Okay, so that's optimizing. You score really well on these things. That means you really, in our terminology, you have achieved efficiency. You're running a successful IT platform. Now, the next slide is, how do we get to the next level? How do we go beyond running an IT platform to transforming or really rocket powering a business model? And that's the monetized set of capabilities. So to start with, we must be executive partnered. Not that doesn't help in stabilizing and optimizing as well. I think it's just critical here. And again, there are blind spots that, from the perspective of where IT sits, they're not going to understand what the strategy of the company could look like, should look like. They may know what things might be possible. Here are new capabilities. Here are things we think our customers might be interested in. That's the partnership, because the business executives may not know those things. But do they make sense? Would they really grow our market share? Is it a meaningful revenue stream that we think is worth going for, or is it just crumbs on the floor that we spend a lot of money for not much gain, right? Is it strategic? Not just a plan, but do we have desirable, meaningful, achievable long-term goals, and is everything we're doing leading toward that? It's good sort of organization to have a plan. If that plan is really game-changing, now we have something, right? So is it strategic, and is it innovative? It is. Things are moving so fast in this economy. If you are not drawing out the best new innovative ideas from everyone on your team, the likelihood that you can really move the needle and compete against companies who do have that is low. We've got to have, it's a culture, it's a process, it is a mindset, it's leadership to understand that if people feel safe to throw out what might be a crazy idea, half-baked maybe idea, if they feel safe to throw that out, you open up the possibility that someone else hears that, and maybe they have the other half of the half-baked, and you've got a hybrid solution that is just unlike anything else. Are we data focused? That's not just IT, that is the entire organization. Is there a recognition that data is a strategic asset? Is it treated as such? Or do people think about putting data into the system as, let's put in what we need to put in order to get accounting what they need, and get payroll what they need so I can get paid, right? If it's sort of a means to an end and let's do the minimum possible, you haven't achieved that data mindset. That it varies widely, honestly, from industry to industry. But there are so many who may not even realize the value that data can bring, whether it's the insights we talked about, whether it's new revenue stream, new products, the ability to create AI models. You need that data. You need it complete and cleansed and enriched. When you get there, you'll be amazed at what it can do. Are we rote automated? So there are so many processes, even still after how many decades of IT work in the corporate world, there are still people in knowledge worker jobs, white collar jobs, sitting in front of computers doing the same process over and over. And a lot of them are simple enough that the rules could be written on an index card. We're certainly better than we were in the 80s and the 90s, but those things are there. And so let's first of all, let's elevate what human beings are doing in the organization. Let's get them out of this, just turn your brain off and just turn the crank. Get them into judgments, insights, decision-making, where human beings are needed, right? And you may need fewer of those people on the team if you get to that level. And secondly, let's get the consistency and the speed that automation brings, because once you get there, whether it's robotic process automation, whether it is direct system-to-system communication, which is just proliferating so fast these days, one way or another, experimenting. So this one is probably the lowest average score of any that we see. It's just, it's hard for business people to invest in multiple solutions, right? It feels like reinventing the wheel. I understand. I've had those conversations dozens of times, and our consultants, we just see it a lot. What we need to realize is it's not the same wheel being invented, and that when you start parallel tracks, especially on something extremely complicated, I think it's the most innovative, most challenging, maybe the most impactful at the end of the day that need this. Are the systems and models predictive? So having descriptive reporting, dashboarding, visualization, great first step. That's optimization. You need that. If you go to predictive, you're at the next level. Now you are, in the words of Wayne Gretzky, you're skating to where the puck is going to be. And I think it's a great analogy because it paints 1,000 words. Everyone wants that. How do you get there? Predictive models. And again, back on data focused and treating data as the asset, the fodder for making those models really accurate and effective. Really, it's all about data. Self-improving, related concept. So once you have a model, once you have the data to train your AI, and then you turn it loose in the real world, it will have, my guess is, what I've seen, it will have mixed results. There'll be some things that really raise eyebrows and people say, wow, okay, that I would not have thought of that, but it makes sense, and the customer loved it. There are going to be other things come out of that AI model that are really not aligned to reality. Maybe it was data issues in your training data set. Maybe it was a blind spot. Maybe you're trying to do a brand new product or service there's really not a lot of data about. Whatever the case, you need the feedback loop. You need this sort of structure where you learn from what happened. You use the past to predict the future, but then the past is a forward marching line. Commercial is everything that we've talked about here, going to monetizing. Have you achieved it? Do you have a commercial offering, right? That's a zero until you get to the point where you are selling data insights, or you're selling that extra, service advisor module on your software package. Do you have that? And, is there some kind of revenue stream coming in? And are you treating it like it is a revenue stream, and really marketing it and road shows and all of those things? And is it profitable? Final step. You get profitability, that really, the virtuous cycle can kick in, and you begin to have self-funding initiatives where it makes sense to make it better because it's paying for itself, and there is a competitive moat being deepened and widened with every step you take. This really begins to lead us into disruption. When can disruption happen? It's what we just talked about, stacking up to the point where you really can rewrite the customer experience, their expectations, the way they interact with companies like yours. If yours is so different that literally everyone who finds out about it cannot wait to exit their contract with your competitor and switch, you've disrupted. And this happens. And the other obvious driving force on a lot of that is pricing. So some of these things, if they're human intensive and you achieve that level of automation, that you just need fewer people and you can do it a lot more quickly, a lot more affordably. Pricing alone can be a force for disruption. It's really just rewriting the rules in whatever way they're rewritten. But your competitors can't match. So that turns into then, is it an M&A opportunity where you could buy their Rolodex because you've got these capabilities and they don't, and they realize that they're sort of standing on a melting iceberg, and if they want to get anything for it, they need to sell to you. You get really powerful impactful disruption. Like, you never thought you'd see this, you never thought you'd achieve it. If you're playing offense, there's nothing more fun than achieving this. So it's never a guarantee. We don't really, you see our model, we talk more about stabilize, optimize, monetize. It's almost always possible to monetize to some form. Certainly always possible to stabilize and optimize. Disruption, it depends. It depends on your industry. If you're an online brokerage, wow, I mean, this happened, right, 10, 12 years ago. So, I don't know if, is TD Ameritrade going to be able to do something that is disruption level at this point after everything else that's happened, going to $0 trades and everything else. It happened already, right? And some, as we know, some were left behind, and some had to get acquired and sell their iceberg before it melted away completely. We know of companies doing things like this on this bullet list of just really, really disruptive capabilities that put them in a position in their markets. They can be as big as they want to be. And they've got the advantage that they really, even geographically, could expand and begin to disrupt other markets because there's no one else that's matched what they're doing. Here are a couple of other thoughts just to think about, specifically your IT leader and your executive leadership. The next slide. IT is so different from what business leaders do. I think accountants are probably able to understand what marketing people do, what operations people do, maybe a little bit easier than understanding what CIOs do. And vice versa. CIOs have a hard time understanding what those other business executives do. It's because of our training. It's because of how different it is that what we were taught in college and how we've spent our time as IT professionals. So, there's sort of understandable reasons why these things happen. But as a result, we do see many, many situations where it's not that there's the wrong leader in place. That sometimes, obviously, that happens and changes need to occur. But honestly, far more frequent is a small and mid-sized company that has a homegrown IT leader who is very loyal, who everyone likes. They're smart, they're responsive, they know everything about the platform. They've been involved in every project that's happened in the last 10 years. What is wrong with that? Well, they've not seen anything else. They may go to conferences, they may read journal articles on the web, et cetera, et cetera. It's not the same thing as being on project teams in other contexts. So there can be some blind spots there. The other thing we see a lot, particularly small companies, outsource their IT. And it's easy to fall into a thought pattern that says, if I've outsourced it, that means that's covered. Check the box, right? You're a CEO, you're busy with so many other things. The problem there that help may be needed for is you are relying on the same group for your strategy and for the answer to the question, what should we do? You're relying on the same group that's providing the service. So that can lead to all kinds of, charges going up, services going down. Lowest common denominator, let's not change anything because there's a risk that people will be unhappy if we do. And we want to keep them happy so they'll keep paying our invoice. Fighting human nature on a lot of these things. If you do have an IT leader who's overseeing staff and or vendors, they're often, again, not given a seat at the table. Maybe they haven't earned a seat at the table. Mistakes are made in both directions. And if all they talk about is keeping the lights on and network and uptime and upgrades and patching, and I understand if you're holding a C-suite meeting, it doesn't really feel valuable or important to invite that person to the room, because what are they going to offer? But someone wired the right way really can offer. and equally important, they can take away things from that meeting that inform the direction that they want to take IT. So if you have an IT leader who's not thinking that way, we have a service. I don't want to make this a commercial about Innovation Vista. There are several of our competitors have services. I would just encourage you, if some of this resonates with you and you say this is, sort of the pattern we're in at my company, just think a little bit differently and think, it doesn't need to be a wholesale change. It doesn't really need to be anything major at all. We do a lot of our CIO coaching and advisory work confidentially. So that is literally a one-on-one kind of relationship where we are helping them broaden their horizon, think a little bit more in business terms, business impact terms. We're bringing innovative ideas. We're bringing things we've seen at other companies that are on the leading edge. So we help them. We position them to be more and to be what we call an IT intrapreneur at your company. So something to think about, whether you get it from us or someone else. You need that broader view in your IT leader. All right, now let's turn the table. Assessing the board, assessing the CEO. I know some of you on the call are CEOs, some are COOs, other C-suite, and we may have some board of directors people. I don't see anyone that has that title, but I think wherever you sit in business leadership, you need to spend some time on technology. It is the fastest moving, highest risk thing out there for all the reasons we just talked about, all these previous slides, all the trends, all the things that now are feasible and affordable that 10 years ago would have been prohibitively expensive to run AI models of the kind that are now running on a daily basis. They have the potential to disrupt your industry. If they haven't already, and you would know, but do you know if your competitors are working on something right now? I encourage people, if you think someone else is going to be playing offense, don't wait till you have to play defense. Let's start. Let's begin to think about this. And even if you do get disrupted and you have to put yourself up for sale or some worst case scenario, you're in better shape having some kind of intellectual property that's valuable in this new worldview that comes in your industry versus someone who is on that melting iceberg and literally selling your Rolodex and very little else. So this is important. The SEC is making it more important for public companies. There is a proposal. I think they're hesitant to put this on right in the middle of all the rate increases and Federal Reserve actions that are happening. But they have proposed a rule where every public board has to attest to the level of cybersecurity knowledge that they have and to communicate to the SEC what they are doing. If that cybersecurity knowledge is limited or zero, what are you doing about it? I know some boards already they're bringing on CXOs, information security experts, as board members. That is an answer. There's also kind of board advisory service that I think can be part of the answer, part of what we're offering out there for this need. That it doesn't mean you have to change your board members. They just need to think a little differently and again have their horizons broadened, right? Whether it's cyber security topics or innovation and IT capabilities in general. Enormous value there. And again, it's so different from most executive backgrounds. That makes a lot of business leaders turn the other way. I want to encourage you, realize how fast it's changing, what the impact and potential impact are from IT. And if it is different from your background and your executive team's background in the inner circle that's running your company, that ought to be more of a reason to go think about outside help. Whether you get it from us, whether you get it from Deloitte or McKinsey, or choose your partner. Get it from someone. Get it from someone who is living and breathing this every day, and position yourself to potentially play offense and get on the leading edge of this wave before it drowns you. So that is our presentation. I'm hopefully valuable. This is, again, I'm very happy to answer questions. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer questions on LinkedIn, even as a follow-up. Of course, we'd love to do consulting work for your company, but I'm not seeking that with this webinar. I'm happy to clarify. I'm happy to help you. Like I said, give you the questions to ask if you're not sure how to assess certain things, and you really do want that score out of 100 to know where you stand. So questions. So what are good scores? Okay, good, very good question. My first consulting answer is it depends on your industry and your strategy, right? But to give you a real answer, I think a 70. I think we talked about before the 70 on the stabilize. When we see companies below that, it's troubling, and there are usually glaring reasons and glaring risks that need to be remediated right away. Above 70, does a 74 need to go to an 84? Sometimes not. It begins to depend a lot. And, if you got a 7 on every one of those metrics, you're in pretty good shape. Optimize, we see lower scores typically. I think there's ROI for every step forward that you take, by the way, on the optimized set of capabilities. 50, probably the sort of break point, like, are we doing well on that line? Bang for the buck, purposeful, architecturally planned. Are we just a well-managed platform? Get a 50. I'd begin to be able to say that. Monetize. Monetize of all of them really does depend on the industry. I will say we see far more companies below 30 than we do above. So that it's not even the median. Probably 20 is our median. Now, most of our market is mid-sized companies, 100 million to south of $1 billion, so 100 to 900 million range. We do work for some smaller companies. We have some advisory work where it's literally sort of a few hours a week, up to maybe 8 hours a week, where we're not virtual CIO or an interim CIO kind of engagement. We are just helping them. We are that advisor either to the head of IT or to the C-suite and board. Some very small companies. That's an affordable bill, and very small companies sometimes interested in that. So in our target market, there are very few companies that have done a lot in monetizing, and that's what makes it so exciting. A team of 300 plus consultants, lots of wisdom on that, and big part of what we hope to bring to the table. But don't be scared if you're small. We gave a few examples of sort of disruption level things. Even if you don't disrupt your industry, if you could find ways to bring in revenue for IT and make it a profit center, or have it offset half of the cost of running your platform, that in itself is game changing for the economics of your business model. So many things here. I could keep going forever. I appreciate everyone's questions. There are a few individuals I appreciate the notes around wanting to follow up. I'll reach out to each of you. And for everyone else, that door is open. Connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email, and love to talk about all of this stuff further. It's my very favorite topic in the world. So wish you all the best, and thanks again for being part of this webinar.